Following my cousin's wedding, I signed into my account. It was drained. My dad snickered, "We used it for the family, you'll survive." My fingers shook as I rose and replied, "Then you won't survive what comes next." They all laughed, until a thunderous blast rattled the walls and the front door blew wide open. Can you imagine the gut-wrenching moment you realize the people you call family didn't just steal your life savings, they stole your very identity? And then tried to blame you for it. What the hell do you even do then? For most of my life, family was supposed to be this rock-solid fortress, right? Shared meals, unwavering support, that unspoken loyalty you could always fall back on when the world got rough. At least, that's what I desperately wanted to believe. The truth, though, was way, way uglier. And I didn't see how deep the rot went until the night after my cousin Claire's wedding. The wedding itself, honestly. It was fine. Just fine. Claire, you know, she was always the family's golden child. The one who could do no wrong. Every family gathering was just another opportunity to gush about her grades, her career, her upcoming marriage. Meanwhile, anything I did was just dismissed. Like it was cute or unrealistic. I'd actually started my own business 2 years prior. It was small, yeah, but it was growing. I'd poured everything I had into it. But my dad, my uncles, even my grandma, they treated it like a silly little hobby. At the wedding, the favoritism was practically a comedy show. The speeches were overflowing with praise for Claire. But when it came to me, I was just the cousin who showed up. Nobody asked about my work. Nobody cared what I was doing. It stung, yeah. It felt like 1,000 tiny needles pricking my skin. But I kept my head down, forcing a polite smile, sipping that cheap champagne. I kept telling myself it didn't matter. It's what I always told myself. But the truth is, it did matter. It mattered every single time I caught my dad looking at me with that mix of disappointment and amusement, like I was some underachieving kid instead of a grown man building something from scratch. It mattered when relatives would lean across the table, whispering about how proud they were of Claire, completely ignoring me, sitting right there. I tried to bury those feelings during the wedding, but they never stayed buried for long. That night, I drove home exhausted, but oddly relieved it was over. I remember kicking off my shoes, throwing on sweats, and sitting down at my desk, just to check emails before bed. That's when I saw it. My banking app wouldn't load right at first. And when it finally did, I froze. My account balance was wiped clean. Every single penny I had worked for, every bit of savings I'd built, gone. At first, I thought it had to be fraud. A hacker, a glitch. My heart was hammering, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I scrolled through the transactions, frantic. But what I saw made me go perfectly still. The withdrawals weren't random. They were transfers. Transfers made directly into an account with a name I knew far too well, my father's. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. I actually thought I was going to pass out right there at my desk. For what felt like an eternity, I just sat in the glow of my laptop screen, whispering to myself, no. 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 When I finally called my dad, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm, almost smug. "James," he said, like he'd been waiting for this call. What did you do?" I managed to choke out. He didn't hesitate. "We took it for the family. You'll survive." Just like that. No apology, no hesitation, no shame. My stomach dropped. My entire body went cold, then hot, like I'd been set on fire from the inside out. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. He chuckled, a low, satisfied sound that made my skin crawl. "Don't look so shocked. Everything you have, it comes from us anyway. You'll be fine. I don't know what came over me, but I shot up so fast my chair slammed into the wall. My voice cracked when I shouted, "Then you won't survive what happens next." And I meant it. My father just laughed. I could hear other voices in the background. My uncle, maybe my mother, too. They were all in on it. They thought it was funny. They thought I was powerless. The call ended with their laughter echoing in my ear. I stood there in my living room, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. That's when I heard it. A deafening bang. Like thunder inside the walls. The whole house seemed to tremble. And before I could even process it, my front door burst open. The bang that rattled my walls wasn't a random break-in or the police. No, it was my family. My father, my Uncle Peter, and even my younger brother Caleb, standing there in the doorway like they owned the place. They didn't even knock. They just barged in. My father held up his hands like he was entering a room he'd already claimed. "Relax, James," he said, brushing past me like I was nothing more than furniture in his way. "We came to talk this out in person. Didn't want you doing anything rash." Rash, that word burned. As if I was some unstable child prone to tantrums. As if the theft of my entire savings was something that required me to calm down, not them to explain. My Uncle Peter followed close behind, his booming voice filling the room. "You should be thanking us, James, really. We're keeping the money safe. Do you honestly think you could handle that kind of responsibility? Come on. You've always been careless with your choices." Careless, that word cut deep. Because it was the same word they'd used for years. When I chose not to go into the family business, when I invested in my startup instead of going to law school like Caleb, every independent decision I'd ever made was painted as reckless or stupid. And now, with the smirk on my uncle's face, it was clear. They hadn't taken the money because they needed it. They took it because they thought they had the right to. Caleb stayed quiet at first, shifting uncomfortably near the door until Dad nudged him. "Go on, tell your brother why this is necessary." My brother finally spoke, his voice laced with that mix of arrogance and insecurity I'd grown used to. "Dad's right, James. Look, the wedding was expensive. Claire deserved the best. She's the future of this family, not you. You're always talking about your company, but you barely make enough to keep yourself afloat. This way, at least the money's being put to good use." The air left my lungs. Claire's wedding. That's what my life savings had been reduced to. Paying for flower arrangements, an open bar, an address that probably cost more than my car. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them all out. But my father's voice cut through my rage like a blade. "Don't look so betrayed, James. You're part of this family, and family sacrifices. You'll understand one day when you stop chasing fantasies and accept your role." "My role?" I snapped, my voice louder than I expected. "What role is that, exactly?" "The ATM. The joke everyone laughs at while Claire gets the praise and Caleb gets the support." Dad's eyes narrowed. His voice turned cold. "Your role is to contribute. You don't get to question where the money goes. It's not really yours anyway. Everything you've done, every opportunity you've had, it all started because of us. Never forget that. It was always the same manipulation. Every accomplishment I had, they'd trace back to themselves. If I landed a client, it was because they raised me to be persuasive. If I saved money, it was because they taught me the value of hard work. Nothing was ever mine. Nothing I did could stand on its own." Uncle Peter clapped me on the shoulder, hard enough to make me flinch. "You'll get over this. You're young. You've got time to build it back. Meanwhile, we'll make sure the family name shines." Claire's wedding was just the beginning. People are already talking about how perfect it was. That's because of you, in a way. Be proud of that. Proud? You wanted me to be proud that I'd been robbed for the sake of their image. Caleb, emboldened now, leaned against the wall and smirked. Besides, James, you never really belonged in the spotlight. You're too quiet, too soft. Let the real leaders handle things. You do better when you just follow along. My fists clenched so tightly I thought my nails might break skin, but I stayed still. My heart pounded against my ribs. They thought they'd beaten me into silence. They thought I would swallow this, like I had swallowed every other slight, every other insult, every other dismissal. Dad finally sat down on my couch, crossing his legs like he was king of the castle. Now that we've cleared that up, you'll sign over the rest. Any investments, any savings tucked away. We'll manage it. That way, you won't be tempted to waste it. The room spun. The rest, they didn't just want what they'd already taken. They wanted everything. And as I looked at their smug faces, at my father lounging in my living room as though it already belonged to him, a quiet realization took root. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. About crushing whatever independence I had left. I stayed silent, letting them think they'd won another round. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't just trembling anymore. I was planning. And that was the last time my father mistook my silence for weakness. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. After they finally left, smug, satisfied, and absolutely certain they had me under their thumb, I just sat at my desk, staring at the empty account on my laptop screen. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out every ounce of hope I had left. I replayed their words over and over. Asterisk, you'll survive. You're careless. Sign over the rest, asterisk, every syllable crawled under my skin like poison. By morning, I was numb. My phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from relatives. Group chats about how beautiful Claire's wedding had been. Photos of champagne glasses raised high. And then, like a knife in the gut, I saw my dad had posted a picture online. Claire beaming in her white dress, Caleb beside her, and my father in the middle, his caption reading, "Family comes first." Always family. That word had never felt so twisted. Later that week, the betrayal deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. I went to the bank in person, thinking maybe, just maybe, I could reverse what had happened. But when I sat across from the manager, a woman I'd known since high school, she gave me a look that made my stomach churn. "James," she said carefully. "Your father came in with paperwork. You signed over power of attorney last year, didn't you?" My heart stopped. What? No. Absolutely not. But she slid a document across the desk, and there it was, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The lines were shaky, uneven. The way my father's handwriting always looked when he tried to mimic someone else. I knew instantly what had happened. He had forged it. He had gone so far as to fake my consent just to take control of everything I had. I felt dizzy. This isn't real. You can't honor this, right? But the manager just shook her head, her voice low. "James, it's already been processed. The accounts are drained. Legally, it looks authorized." I walked out of that bank in a haze, the sunlight blinding, every step heavy with the realization that my own father had committed fraud against me and the system was letting him get away with it. When I got home, the situation worsened. A thick envelope sat on my doorstep. Inside, neatly folded, was a new contract, my father's handwriting all over it. It was a family agreement demanding that I redirect all future business profits into a joint account he controlled. At the bottom was a signature line with my name already scrolled there, forged again. And tucked behind the contract was a handwritten note, asterisk, "Stop fighting this, James. You'll only make things harder for yourself." Do the right thing for the family, *. My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers on the floor. I just stared at them, heat rising behind my eyes. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just favoritism. This was a deliberate, calculated move to strip me of everything. My savings, my business, my independence. And he'd done it all with that same self-satisfied smile. But the true breaking point came 2 nights later. I had gone to visit my grandmother, the one person in the family I thought might understand, maybe even stand up for me. She was sitting in her floral armchair, the same one she'd had since I was a kid. Her frail hands folded neatly in her lap. For a brief moment, I thought I saw sympathy in her eyes. "Grandma," I whispered. "Dad drained my accounts. He forged my signature. He's trying to take my business. I don't know what to do." She reached for my hand, her touch soft, and for half a second, I thought she might comfort me. But then her words cut me deeper than I could have imagined. "James, don't be dramatic. Your father knows best. He's protecting you from yourself. You should be grateful." Grateful, my throat closed up. Even she was on his side. Even the one person I thought might have my back. I left her house in silence. The betrayal heavy in my chest. It was like losing her twice. Once as a grandmother, and again as someone I could trust. When I got home that night, there was one final blow waiting for me. An email forwarded from my dad's account. It was a notice from the state business registry. My company, the business I had built from scratch, the thing I had poured sleepless nights and endless effort into, was no longer under my name. Ownership had been transferred to him. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. My father had stolen everything. Not just the money. Not just the savings. But my identity, my livelihood, my future. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The boy who had always swallowed the insults, who had always played the quiet role, who had always been told he was soft, he was gone. All that was left was silence. And under that silence, a fire that would not go out until I got everything back. Rock bottom doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in slowly, moment by moment, until you wake up one day and realize you're not standing anymore. You're on the floor, looking up at a world that seems determined to crush you. That's where I found myself in the weeks after my father took everything. At first, it was denial. I kept thinking there had to be some mistake, some loophole, some way to undo the damage. I spent long nights calling lawyers, only to be told the same thing: the documents look valid. The transfers were processed. Without a drawn-out, expensive legal battle, there wasn't much to be done. Even if I fought, they said my father had more resources, more influence, and more support. I was just one man. Then came the bills. My rent, my utilities, the loan I'd taken out for equipment for my company. Every reminder of the life I had built showed up, demanding money I no longer had. I sold off what I could. My laptop, my camera, even the watch I'd been given for graduating college. Each item felt like a piece of myself being chipped away. I lived on instant noodles and canned soup, my fridge humming emptily in the corner. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion. It was the humiliation. Friends I had once helped support asked why I was suddenly avoiding outings. Clients who had trusted me with their projects sent emails asking why my company wasn't responding anymore. I couldn't tell them the truth, that my own family had gutted me from the inside out. So, I said nothing. I let the silence swallow my reputation. One evening, desperate and drained, I walked into my parents' house. I don't even know what I was hoping for. Maybe some scrap of humanity. Maybe a chance to beg. They were sitting at the dining table, laughing over wine like nothing had happened. My father looked up at me with that same condescending smile. "Ah, James finally decided to visit. Have you come to your senses yet? I swallowed hard. Dad, please. You've taken everything. I don't have a company anymore. I don't even have enough to pay rent. I need something back. Anything. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his glass of wine. James, this is what responsibility looks like. You think life is about chasing your little dreams. No. Life is about sacrifice. You'll understand that once you stop fighting us. Until then, this is the lesson you need to learn. My mother sat quietly beside him, nodding, her eyes cold. Uncle Peter grinned. Caleb smirked. The entire room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing tighter and tighter. I left that night feeling smaller than I ever had before. On the drive home, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, every breath shallow. By the time I pulled into my empty apartment, I couldn't even cry anymore. I just sat there, staring at the dark, listening to the silence. Days bled into each other. I stopped answering calls. I stopped checking emails. I was a shell of myself, moving through life like a ghost. Rock bottom wasn't a crash. It was quicksand. The more I fought, the deeper I sank. But here's the thing about quicksand. Eventually, you stop thrashing. You go still. You breathe. And once you're calm, you can think. That's when the planning started. Quietly, in the back of my mind, almost without me realizing it at first, a thought would slip in, asterisk they forged your signature. What else have they left exposed, asterisk another thought, asterisk they underestimate you. They always have. That's their weakness, asterisk I started keeping notes. Late at night when the city was quiet, I'd sit at my desk with a cheap notebook, writing down everything I knew. Dates, transactions, names, patterns. It wasn't much, but it was a seed, a map of betrayal. And slowly, through the exhaustion and humiliation, a different feeling began to grow. Resolve. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I was finished. But rock bottom has a strange way of clarifying what really matters. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The climb back up wasn't quick, and it wasn't pretty. At first, it was like trying to move after breaking every bone in your body. Slow, painful, but necessary. I knew I couldn't fight my family head-on yet. They had money, influence, and the smug confidence of people who believed they were untouchable. So, I did the only thing I could. I disappeared into the background and started rebuilding in silence. I picked up work wherever I could. Freelance jobs, odd tasks for people who didn't ask too many questions. I stayed quiet, kept my head down, and saved every penny I could. The meals were still simple, the nights still long, but for the first time in weeks, I felt purpose creeping back in. Each small payment, each new skill learned, was a brick in the foundation of something bigger. One of the first breaks came when an old client reached out asking if I'd be willing to take on a small project under the table. I don't care what name you use, he said. You're the only one I trust to get it right. That line stuck with me. The only one he trusted. My family might have stripped me of everything, but they couldn't take away the trust I'd earned, the work ethic I had, or the mind they'd spent years belittling. So, I reinvented myself. I registered a new company under a different name, one that had no ties to my family. I used a friend's address as the business mailing location, and I built quietly, project by project. No announcements, no social media posts, no bragging. Just work. Silent, steady, and relentless. While they drank wine and boasted about Claire's perfect wedding, I was poring over contracts, designing late into the night, meeting clients in quiet cafes. The money started trickling in, and then flowing. I wasn't rich, far from it, but I was moving again. Each invoice paid felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. Months passed, and the silence worked in my favor. My family thought they had beaten me into submission. They thought I had nothing left, which meant they weren't watching me. And in that shadow, I was growing stronger. The turning point came when a project I had taken on for a small local business caught the attention of a larger firm. They reached out, impressed with the work, and offered me a contract that could keep me afloat for years. I remember staring at the email, my hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from the rush of possibility. I accepted, of course, but carefully, quietly. Every paper trail, every dollar I kept under lock and key, away from the greedy hands of those who had already tried to strip me bare. As my work grew, so did my confidence. The shame I'd been carrying began to peel away. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a future on my own terms. My bank account slowly filled again, though this time I split it across multiple places, all under names my father didn't know existed. He couldn't touch this. Not now. Not ever again. And with each success, I started to notice something I hadn't before. People respected me. Not because of my last name. Not because of my family. But because of me. Clients referred me to their friends. Partners asked for my input. For the first time, I wasn't just the overlooked son or the failure at the dinner table. I was someone worth listening to. The irony was, my family still had no idea. They thought I was licking my wounds, stumbling through life, barely holding on. And I let them think that. I played the part of the struggling, beaten down son when I saw them. I let Dad lecture me about responsibility. Let Caleb smirk about his better prospects. Let Grandma pat my hand and tell me to be grateful. I swallowed it all with a blank face. Because while they sat in their comfortable chairs, basking in their imagined superiority, I was climbing higher and faster than they could see. And as I stood on that invisible ladder, looking down at the people who had pushed me into the dirt, I realized something crucial. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had given me the greatest gift of all, motivation. A fire that would never go out until justice was mine. It started with a whisper, one I wasn't meant to hear. I had been keeping my distance from the family for months, showing up only when absolutely necessary. I played my part well, shoulders hunched, eyes tired, wallet supposedly empty. To them, I was still the struggling son who hadn't learned his lesson. But beneath that mask, my new company was thriving. The contract I'd landed had opened doors to even bigger projects. And while my father smirked at family dinners, I was wiring 5-figure payments into accounts he didn't even know existed. Then came Claire's engagement party. Yes, she'd already had the wedding. They drained my savings to fund it. But now there was another event, another excuse for them to parade wealth and superiority. I didn't want to go, but part of me knew that staying in the loop meant staying one step ahead. So, I went, blending into the crowd with a drink in hand, pretending to be invisible. That's when I heard it. My father and Uncle Peter were standing near the back patio, voices low, but not low enough. "The deal has to go through soon," Uncle Peter muttered. "If the numbers don't add up, the investors will walk. We've already sunk too much into this." "Don't worry," my father said smoothly. "James' money covered more than they realize. They think we've got assets lined up. We'll make it work." I froze. Asterisk investors. Deals, asterisk. This wasn't just about Claire's wedding. They had funneled my savings into something else, something risky enough that they were whispering about it in shadows. I edged closer, careful not to draw attention. "But what if the audit flags it?" Uncle Peter pressed. "The transfers, the signatures. They won't." My father snapped. "And if they do, James will take the fall. Everything's under his name, not mine. He doesn't have the backbone to fight it." The words hit me like a physical slap. Not only had he stolen from me, he'd set me up as the scapegoat. If their so-called deal collapsed, if the investors uncovered fraud, I'd be the one left holding the bag. I walked away from that conversation with my heart pounding, a storm brewing inside me. For the first time, I saw the full picture. This wasn't just greed. It was calculated exploitation. My father hadn't simply drained my accounts. He tied my name to their shady dealings, betting that I'd stay too beaten down to defend myself. But what he didn't know was that while he thought I was powerless, I had been building power of my own. Through my new company, I had gained access to resources I never had before. Lawyers who actually respected me, accountants who knew how to dig into hidden numbers, clients who trusted me enough to share contacts in high places. And as my contracts grew, so did my understanding of business structures, loopholes, and the fragile threads that held deals together. One night, sitting at my desk with the same cheap notebook I'd started months ago, I connected the dots. My father and uncle's investment deal wasn't solid. It was a house of cards. And I now had enough knowledge, enough leverage to blow it over with a single push. But I didn't push. Not yet. Because revenge isn't just about striking. It's about striking when they least expect it, when the fall will hurt the most. So I started gathering. Quietly. Methodically. Like a hunter setting traps in the dark. I collected every piece of evidence I could find. Emails forwarded accidentally. Scraps of conversation overheard. Business documents carelessly left in drawers at family gatherings. Each detail went into a growing file, neatly organized, waiting for the day I would use it. And then came the moment that sealed my resolve. A client I had been working with, someone high up, someone with influence far beyond what my father could dream of, leaned across the table one afternoon and said, "You've got a sharp mind, James. Have you ever considered what you could do with the right backing?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because with his backing, I wouldn't just be a son fighting a family war. I'd be a man with allies, resources, and the kind of power my father had always claimed I lacked. For the first time in my life, the balance was shifting. They thought they had buried me. But I wasn't buried. I was planted. And now I was ready to grow into something they would never see coming. Revenge, I learned, isn't about anger. Anger burns too quickly, leaving you reckless. No, real revenge is about patience. Quietly weaving the net until the moment comes when you can pull it tight and watch your enemies thrash. By the time that moment arrived, I was calm, almost frighteningly calm. It started small, subtle moves, the kind no one notices at first. I began leaking pieces of information about my father and uncle's investment deal to the right ears. Never directly, never in a way that pointed back to me. Just quiet nudges to people in positions of power. Auditors who love chasing down inconsistencies. Competitors who would pounce at the first sign of weakness. It was like sprinkling breadcrumbs, each one leading toward the rotten core my family had tried so hard to hide. Meanwhile, I secured my own position. My client with influence had introduced me to contacts who understood how to protect assets, how to shield income, how to move money in ways no one outside the circle could trace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was insulated. Even if my family tried to come after me again, they'd find nothing to take. The real strike came at a quarterly family dinner. I had kept up appearances, still playing the part of the struggling son, shoulders heavy, voice quiet. Dad loved those dinners because it gave him a stage. He held court at the head of the table, glass of wine in hand, bragging about how his business sense was keeping the family afloat. That night, he was particularly smug. "It's a good thing James has finally stopped wasting time on his little projects," he said loudly, loud enough for the entire table to laugh. "He's finally learning that family comes first. Isn't that right, son?" I looked around at their faces, smirking, nodding, some even pitying me. For a moment, I let the silence stretch. Let them bask in their imagined superiority. Then I smiled. Not the broken, defeated smile they expected, but a calm, steady smile that made a few of them visibly flinch. "You're right, Dad," I said evenly. "Family does come first. That's why I thought you should all know something before you hear it from someone else." The room stilled. I pulled out a neat folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of the forged documents, my signature in my father's shaky handwriting, the transfers to accounts under his control, the shell companies he and Uncle Peter had been funneling money through. Pages of evidence, each stamped with official seals from lawyers and auditors who had quietly verified everything for me. "Funny thing," I continued, my voice calm, almost conversational. "Turns out forging your own son's signature is still illegal. And siphoning his money into a fraudulent deal, well, that doesn't look too good on paper either. Especially when investors start asking where their money really went." My father's face drained of color. Uncle Peter sputtered, reaching for the folder. But I pulled it back with a steady hand. "Don't worry," I said, my tone razor-sharp beneath the calm. "The right people already have copies. In fact, they've had them for weeks. I just thought you deserved to know before the calls start coming in." The silence was deafening. Caleb stared at me, his smirk gone, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat, for once without a spotlight to save her. My grandmother's fork clattered against her plate. My father finally spoke, his voice low, trembling with fury. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "I already did." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple, undeniable truth. The fallout didn't happen all at once, but I saw the cracks forming right there at the dinner table. My father's hand shook as he set down his glass. Uncle Peter's face turned a dangerous shade of red. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking under their gaze. They were shrinking under mine. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. The call started 2 days later. I heard about it first through whispers in the family group chat. My Uncle Peter had been questioned by one of the investors. They demanded proof of where the funds had gone, and the numbers didn't line up. Then another message: Dad hadn't shown up to his office. By the end of the week, the floodgates had opened. Auditors swarmed through their accounts. Investors pulled out, and the very people they had boasted about impressing were suddenly demanding explanations. I didn't need to lift a finger. The net I had woven tightened all on its own. My father tried calling me at first, leaving message after message. His tone shifted with every voicemail, furious in one, pleading in the next, trying to guilt me in another. "James, you're ruining the family. Do you understand what you've done? You're destroying us." But I didn't answer. Not once. Uncle Peter wasn't as subtle. He showed up at my apartment one evening, pounding on the door until my neighbors peeked out into the hallway. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "You've got to fix this, James," he hissed when I finally cracked the door open. "We'll give you a cut. We'll make it right. Just pull the evidence back." I let him ramble, his words spilling out in desperation. When he finally stopped, I looked him dead in the eye and said quietly, "This is me fixing it." Then I closed the door in his face. The unraveling was quick after that. My father lost his position on the board of the company he had bragged about leading for years. Uncle Peter filed for bankruptcy within months. Caleb, who had relied on their support for everything, suddenly found himself scrambling for work he wasn't qualified for. Claire, whose perfect wedding had been funded by my stolen savings, discovered that her dream life was built on money that no longer existed. Even my grandmother, who had dismissed my cries for help, had to watch as the empire she'd been so proud of collapsed into dust. Meanwhile, I flourished. My new company continued to grow, untouched by their scandals. Clients trusted me more than ever, impressed not just by my work, but by the quiet resilience I carried. The friends I thought I had lost returned, not out of pity, but out of genuine respect. For the first time, I stood on solid ground, and it was ground I had built myself. The last time I saw my father, he wasn't the towering figure who had stolen everything from me. He wasn't the man with the smug grin and the wine glass in his hand. He was sitting alone in a diner, shoulders slumped, staring into a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He didn't see me at first, but when our eyes met across the room, something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Then shame. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but I shook my head. There was nothing left to say. I walked out without a word, the bell above the diner door jingling softly behind me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying his weight anymore. My family had taken everything from me. But in trying to break me, they had given me something far greater than money or approval, freedom. And as I stepped into the cold air that night, I smiled. Not the quiet, strange smile they used to mock, but a real one. Because they had finally learned what I had known for months. So, I've told you my story. What would you have done when your own blood tried to bury you? Have you ever had to fight back against the people who were supposed to love you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really keen to hear them.